Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and welcome to the best and worst books I read in 2019. If you haven't been here before, I read a lot of books. In fact, in 2019 I finished 268 books. And because it gives me a little bit of existential dread to go through that entire list and try to come up with my top 10 favorite or my top 10 least favorite or anything like that, what I've decided to do is revisit all of my monthly wrap-ups and see what was my least favorite book in that month and what was my favorite book in that month. This means that previous Kathy has done all the work for current Kathy. I just need to open the documents where I kept all of that information and let you know how my reading went month to month to month in 2019. So, obviously, we're going to start with January. I haven't opened any of these. I only know the answers to December because December just happened, so I haven't had time to forget it yet. Alright, in January I read 17 books. The one I liked the least was called Spook Country by William Gibson. It turns out that this was the second in a series that I hadn't read previously and was very confusing, and that's the reason I didn't like it so much. Maybe if I started the beginning of the series I would have understood what was happening in this book. But the thing I ended up liking the most about it was at the end of it they ended up in Vancouver, which is a city very close to where I am. And my favorite book of January was Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente. The way I described this book was it's like being put into a vat of glitter and swimming your way out to the top and finally getting to air again and then having more glitter tossed on you, but like in the best possible way. This book is about people on Earth who find out that there are other people throughout the galaxy, and essentially once your world's race gets to the point where it might understand that there is life outside of their own world, you are put into a singing competition to find out if you are sentient. If you come in last in that singing competition, your entire world is wiped out of the galaxy. So you know, it's intense. Let's move on to February, shall we? February 2019, I read 19 books and DNF'd a book, so my DNF will be my least favorite. This was an unfortunate book club pick that I did not finish because I was not enjoying it whatsoever, and that was The High Mountains of Portugal by Yann Martel. I remember really enjoying Life of Pi by Yann Martel. Fun fact, it was actually the first audiobook I ever got out of the library, and I listened to it on my Discman on the way home from graveyard shifts at a popular fast food chain when I was 19 years old. That right there is a much more cohesive story than whatever was trying to happen in the High Mountains of Portugal. I didn't get very far. I wasn't enjoying it whatsoever. Let's move on. That means my favorite book of February was Jack of Hearts and Other Parts by Elsie Rosen. This is an incredibly sex-positive book about Jack, who is queer and out of the closet at school, and has been known to get himself into some sexual adventures, and his friend asks him to write a column on her website just basically giving sex advice. At the same time that this has happened, he ends up getting a blackmailer. So it's this great mixture of sexual content, although I don't believe any of it's actually on the page, and then this mystery behind it, and I really enjoyed it. All the traffic going by my house today. Okay, in March I read 18 books, and the one that I liked the least I gave 2 stars to, and it was Who, What, Where, When, Die. I can't remember who wrote this book. It was the beginning of a very cheesy detective-ish journalist. I think she was a journalist, actually. That makes more sense with Who, What, Where, When, Die. And to be honest, I really can't remember much of the plot. I remember that it was very like, she's not like other girls, so like she was definitely portrayed as like a nerdy girl, but she was also like really skinny and pretty and cool, and I think that she had a stalker or something. I actually read this for the Buzzword Readathon because it covered 4 of the 6 words, because that round of the Buzzword Readathon was who, what, where, when, why, and how. Which means my favorite book that month was my favorite book for the year, a book I actually have 2 of on my shelf. That's Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Not only do I have 2 of these, both of them are signed and personalized. One of them I bought for myself from a shop that a friend of mine works at, and she was able to get the author to sign and personalize for me and then send it to me. And then the other one was a present from my friend Anna, who I met in person for the first time, and Casey McQuiston had just been through town recently, and they ended up not only picking up a copy for me because they knew I loved the book and they read the book because I loved the book, they also got the author to sign it for me, which was just so super sweet. If you somehow haven't heard of Red, White, and Royal Blue, it is a hate-to-love romance between the first son of the United States and a Prince of Wales. It is absolutely wonderful. It will make you smile. There are characters that are just so great, and I highly suggest reading it. I actually read it twice in 2019. On to April, my birth month. Let's see what we've got going. In April, I read 24 books. We're getting into the months where I read way too much. And I didn't have anything less than a 3-star this month, so that's pretty good. My least favorite book was I Hate Fairyland Volume 4. This was a 4-volume graphic novel series, and I just really did not like how it ended. It was such a cliched ending to what was a very cool premise. Basically, this girl was sucked into fairyland, and to get out of fairyland you have to go on a quest, which she didn't really know about, so she's been stuck there for like 20 years or something like that, but she's still in the body of a young girl, even though she's now like a 30-year-old woman on the inside. So it's this little girl that swears and cuts people's heads off left, right, and center, and it's finally figuring out that maybe she can escape fairyland. I really liked that premise, did not like how it ended. And my favorite thing I read in April was Going Off Script by Jen Wilde. This I actually read the first half of while sitting and waiting for a drag show to start at a local venue, which is just so perfect for this queer goodness. This book is about Bex, who recently graduated high school and is going to be an intern in LA on her favorite TV show. And then the showrunner of the TV show actually steals some of her episode ideas, and that is a whole big thing. There's also potential romance ensuing, there's definitely some shenanigans. There are parts of this that aren't entirely realistic, but it's just so lovely and I enjoy the characters so much. And there's overlapping characters from previous books by Jen Wilde that I just loved the package of it so much. In May, I somehow read 29 books and DNF'd one, so the DNF will be my least favorite book of that month. Let's see what it was. It was The Dark. Okay, so The Dark was like a 500-page horror book that I was really looking forward to reading because it's all about this little boy and his dad died, and then I think there's some paranormal weird things happening and he might be stolen away by the dark, and maybe his dad had been stolen away as well. Some of the details are a little fuzzy. The problem with this book is you can tell it was written by a cis dude. Every time there was a woman on the page, he had to talk about what her boobs were doing, which was just unnecessary, to the point where I just couldn't read it anymore, even though I was super excited about the premise and the creepiness. And it looks like my favorite book in May was The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali. If you've ever read Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed, it's very much like that, except for it is queer. So when I saw that this book was coming out, I got very excited and I immediately contacted my friend Sajid, and he's like, yeah, I've been waiting for that book for months. Obviously, I already know about it. Roxana is Muslim, her parents are very religious, and she has a girlfriend, and they end up finding out about it, and they decide to take her back to Bangladesh because her grandfather is ill. However, while they're there, they might as well find her a husband, right? There is a temptation to say that this is less dark than Written in the Stars, which unfortunately I keep comparing it to because they are very similar stories. However, there are some very dark things that happen in this book. There is a lot of homophobia. There are moments where people are working through that, or at least starting to understand that their homophobia is wrong. I won't say that these characters are perfect because they definitely aren't, but this was a very enjoyable read. In June, I read 26 books, and the least favorite, unfortunately, because it was one I picked up for the Queer Lit Readathon, was La Bastarda. This was a very short book. It was also a translated book, so there is a chance that something was lost in translation. And I didn't hate this book. Obviously, it was a 3-star. That's completely fine. There are obviously other books from my year that got lower ratings than this one, but because I like to do this month by month by month, this one just ended up being on the bottom for me. From what I remember, it was short and it didn't really go very far, and you didn't really get attached to the characters. My favorite book in June was This Is How It Always Is. I possibly also read this for Queer Lit. It would be about the right time frame, but I'm not sure if I read it that week or not, because I read a lot that month and I honestly don't remember what was on that TBR and what wasn't. This is a family saga about this husband and wife, and they get together and their romance is beautiful. They're actually wonderful parents and I really loved them. They get together and she's always wanted to have a little girl. They get pregnant and it's a boy. They get pregnant and it's a boy. They get pregnant, it's 2 boys. They get pregnant again and they think they're finally going to get a girl, but they get another boy. Except for that boy is actually transgendered, and it's all about her journey to becoming who she is meant to be, and this family's journey to understanding and accepting what's going on and keeping that daughter safe. There are many points throughout this book where people mess up. There are many points where that character is referred to as he or referred to as she, depending on what the characters think is going on and how that character is feeling, because they are a very young child when they know that they have been given the wrong gender, but they also know that this is something hard for their family, and it's just such a beautiful piece of fiction. I highly recommend it, obviously because it's my favorite from that month. In July, I read another 26 books. Okay, so I read the most in the summer is what I'm figuring out here. And my least favorite book was Can You Ever Forgive Me, which I gave 2 stars. This wasn't as interesting as I wanted it to be. I thought it was about the life of this literary forger and how she started forging documents and why, and to an extent it was, but for somebody who is a literary forger, it just wasn't very well written. I have the strongest feeling that the movie adaptation of this book will actually be better than the book, which I know doesn't happen very often, so I look forward to eventually getting around to watching it. My favorite book in July was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is one of their backlist titles that I didn't know about, picked it up without knowing anything, and really enjoyed. It was very, very heartfelt, and it was a second chance romance between these two people who really loved each other when they were teenagers, and then something happens, and we as the reader don't know what that was and why these people broke up, but they find each other a little bit later in life. If I'm remembering correctly, they're both in relationships. I know at least he is at that point, and I can't remember about her, but they haven't had any contact since whatever happened, which again, we don't know about, happened in the past. So it's about them working through that and us as readers figuring out what happened, and it is a wonderful romance. I very much enjoyed it. In August, I read 29 books, so again, summer is where I get all my reading done. That actually does make sense because I have seasonal affective disorder, so the darker months are harder for me. Also, it's harder to physically read because my apartment is dark. Yeah, so that makes sense to me. Anyway, my least favorite book, which I gave 2 stars because a lot of it was very well written and I liked a lot of it, and then I got to that ending. My buddy read this book with Jean, and we really liked the first book, but this second book... Anyway, the book in question is Feast of Sparks. This is the follow-up to A Lesson in Thorns, which Jean and I buddy read and really, really liked, and we rolled directly into the second book because it had just been released. And then the way this one ended was just so bad, and I hated it. And I hate that I'm probably going to read the third one just to see if the character that did the worst things is going to be redeemed, because I don't want that character to be redeemed. I want them to be kicked out. That's what I want. So yeah, if you're at all curious about what happens with that book, you can see on Goodreads exactly what happened, and not here for it. Consent. Consent is a thing that I prize. So in August, my favorite book was Like a Love Story. This is a historical YA book about 3 teenagers, really. It's about Reza, who is new to the United States and is in the closet, Art, who is very out and very gay, and Judy, who is Art's best friend. They all come together. There's a little bit of a triangle that happens, which is very unfortunate. This is also during the AIDS crisis, so Judy's uncle has AIDS and has many friends who either have it or have died from it. And this book was just heartbreakingly beautiful. I cannot recommend it more. Alright, I know in September I read less books because I went to Booknet Fest, which took a week of time out, and even though I read some while there, I didn't keep up my summer pace, that's for sure. So in September I read 18 books. Okay, perfect. The one I liked the least I gave 2.5 stars, and that was The Haunting of Hill House, which is funny because I actually read this on the recommendation of a friend of mine from Booknet Fest. And weirdly enough, this is another one where I feel like I know there's adaptations and I feel like they're going to be better than how I read it on the page. This is a horror classic, but it's just very, very tame as far as horror goes, so it just wasn't my favorite thing. My favorite thing I read in September, however, was Upside Down, which is a romance between 2 men who are also ace, and it was honestly one of the cutest things I've read in my entire life. It was just so great. The romance between these 2 men was just perfect. There were interesting things happening with the side characters that I really loved. There was a lot of one of the characters really learning what it meant to be ace because he was just coming into that, and it was just so beautiful. In October, I went up to reading 25 books and DNFing another book, so let's see what that was. It was Us Conductors. Yeah, I definitely didn't finish reading this one. This one I picked up because I thought it was going to be really interesting. It's a historical fiction about the guy who created the theremin, and he's got a really interesting story. I actually watched a video kind of about his life and how weird it was. So I was really looking forward to that story, basically. And this, I don't really know what was happening with it. Maybe the way it was structured was just wrong for me. I seem to remember not particularly enjoying the writing of it, and I decided to put it down because sometimes you just have to. Favorite book in October was Six of Crows, which is the first in the duology. This is a heist story with found family, and there's magic elements, and everybody is very different and they fit together so well. And I just finished the second book in the duology and I just really have a lot of feels about it. So I feel like this is hyped. People know about this book. I don't need to talk about it too much. I just need to let you know that yes, I also liked it. All right, November. We're almost through. In November, I read 18 books, and my least favorite book was Umbrella Academy Hotel Oblivion. This is the third volume. I don't know why I keep reading this series. Actually, that's a lie, I do. I wanted to read the series before watching the Netflix show, which I haven't started yet. And again, weirdly enough, with this list, I feel like the show is going to be better than the source material. Why is that happening so much on this list? I'm not entirely sure. Basically, there are a lot of characters that you meet in the first book, and there's a lot of different little timeline things going on, and I didn't really care much about the first book. Therefore didn't really remember which character was which and what special powers they had and what was going on with them, so I didn't really remember anything by the time I got to this third volume, and therefore just didn't really enjoy it. However, what I did enjoy in November is Slay. This book was amazing. By day, Kira is a high school student at a very prestigious high school, and by night she has created a Black-only online game that uses VR, and it was very cool. I'm not a gamer, although I will play occasional games, so I guess I'm a gamer. I'm not a big gamer is what I'm saying. So I thought that maybe some of the game mechanics are going to be too much for me and I wouldn't really understand what's going on, but this was written in such a way that I totally understood what was happening at all times and really enjoyed it. The plot was absolutely fantastic. There's a point where something happens, and I'm not going to spoil that for you, and people all of a sudden know about this game, and then there are white supremacists that think that the game is racist and they want to break into it. I don't feel like I'm explaining this book well enough for how much I really, truly, absolutely enjoyed it, but all I can say is you definitely need to read this book because it is amazing. It is so creative. The game that this character created was so creative. And that brings us, of course, to last month, which is December, which I just did my wrap up for. In December, I read a total of 20 books, and my least favorite book was Semi-Charmed Life. This is a book that had been sitting on my shelves for quite a while that I probably picked up because the cover is very pretty, but didn't really know anything about. And there were parts of this book that just didn't make any sense, and I didn't like it for those reasons. I also didn't like it because the characters were very judgmental and fatphobic. The premise sounded really, really interesting. This girl who's going to school for writing ends up being the ghostwriter of this socialite's blog and kind of gets drawn into that world, and that seemed like it would be interesting. It ended up not being as interesting as I wanted it to be. And my favorite book of December was I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. This is a thriller, and the way it starts out is this mother is taking her child home from school, and that child gets hit by a car and dies. From there, we get this dual perspective of the detective assigned to the case and trying to solve the case, and a mother who is grieving for the loss of a child. These two perspectives were done incredibly well. There was a huge twist that I did not see coming, and then, oh my goodness, all of the things that were happening in the ending I started to see coming, and it got my heart racing. I very much enjoyed this book, and it was just such a surprise to me because I had never really heard of it before. I'd seen it at the library, but I'd never picked it up to see what it was, and I just ended up loving it. So that's it, my 12 best and worst books of 2019. Have you read any of these? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!